On the sunny morning of December 26, 2004, everything seemed perfect on the beach of Khao Lak in Thailand. The gentle breeze blew among the coconut trees, the sky was clear, and the Andaman Sea shimmered like a tranquil mirror before the eyes of the Belón-Alvarez family. María Belón, a Spanish nurse, her husband Enrique, and their children Lucas, 7 years old, Simón, 5, and Tomás, just 2, had just woken up for the second day of their Christmas holiday. They chose this paradisiacal setting to celebrate New Year with peace, rest, and gratitude. The children played in the pool of the Royal Vacation Club, a sophisticated and cozy beachfront hotel, while Enrique prepared to accompany his sons for breakfast. Maria, meanwhile, preferred a moment of contemplation and headed for the beach alone, walking barefoot on the warm sand. That's when something caught her attention. The sea began to recede strangely and silently, revealing the seabed as if pulled by an invisible force. She felt a sudden discomfort, an unusual silence in the air, as though the world had held its breath. Minutes later, a deafening roar echoed out, and a wall of water appeared on the horizon like a monster emerging from the depths. The tsunami's force hit the coast with unimaginable violence, sweeping away people, cars, trees, and structures as if they were toys. Within seconds, the family was separated, swallowed by chaos. What seemed impossible happened. The most impactful survival story of that disaster was just beginning. On the morning of December 26, 2004, the sun shone brightly over the beach of Khao Lak in Thailand. It was the second day of Christmas vacation for the Belón-Alvarez family, consisting of María Belón, a Spanish nurse, her husband Enrique Alvarez, and their 3 children, Lucas, 7 years old, Simón, 5, and Tomás, 2. They had chosen this idyllic destination to enjoy the new year together, resting and celebrating the birth of Jesus Christ in a peaceful and welcoming environment. No one could have imagined that this would become one of the worst natural disasters in modern history. The hotel where they stayed was the Royal Vacation Club, located close to the coast, surrounded by coconut trees, with privileged views of the Andaman Sea. The children played in the pool while the adults prepared for breakfast. Later, Maria would recall noticing something strange about the sea's behavior early that morning. It seemed to be receding, revealing part of the seabed. But amidst the daily rush of travel, she didn't pay much attention to it. Enrique and the boys decided to enjoy the hot weather and went to the pool. Meanwhile, Maria preferred to stay alone, quietly walking along the sandy beach, appreciating the scenery and listening to the sound of the waves. Then, around 8:18 a.m., local time, the first tremor was felt. It was brief, almost imperceptible. Some guests commented among themselves, but no one expected what would follow. At 8:29, the real impact occurred. A gigantic tidal wave, generated by an underwater earthquake measuring 9.1 on the Richter scale, struck the Thai coast. The wave swept away everything in its path. Maria was near the sea when she felt an immense force ripping the ground beneath her feet. She tried to run but was violently thrown against trees and debris. Within seconds, she lost consciousness. Meanwhile, at the hotel pool, Enrique and the younger children were also surprised by the furious water. They were separated from each other without knowing where to go or what to do. Each fought individually for their lives. Lucas, the oldest son, managed to grab onto a floating thatched roof. Simón was carried meters and meters by violent currents, while Tomás, the baby, disappeared from everyone's sight. Maria woke up trapped among branches and roots of a fallen tree. Injured, with deep cuts on her legs and arms, and unable to walk properly, she had to use all her mental strength not to panic. In the distance, she heard screams and cries from other victims. Many injured people sought help, and the scene was one of complete chaos. She knew she had to find her husband and children, but had no idea where they might be. With effort, Maria started crawling until she reached a still-standing structure near the hotel. There, she found a severely injured man and decided to help him despite being hurt herself. After hours of trying to survive and helping whoever she could, she was rescued by local volunteers and taken to an improvised hospital set up in a nearby school. There, Amid physical and emotional pain, Maria wanted to know only one thing. Where were her husband and children? While Maria was unconscious, trapped in a tree, Enrique struggled against the waves to keep Lucas, her oldest son, safe. The current was so strong that it tore Simón from his arms right at the beginning of the impact. Lucas, only 7 years old, held tightly onto his father's shirt while they were carried meters and meters through murky water filled with debris and wreckage. Enrique tried to keep him above the surface, but he couldn't swim well. At a critical moment, they were thrown against a floating thatched roof. Enrique managed to grab hold of it and climb up with Lucas, saving their lives by a narrow margin. It was there that they began drifting even farther from where the other children were. Simón, the middle child, 5 years old, was pulled by the violent current. He would later recall grabbing onto something that seemed to be a mattress during the journey. But within seconds, he was thrown against a tree. Fortunately, Simón survived the impact and managed to steady himself on a broken branch. Injured and frightened, he cried, calling for his father and brothers, receiving no response. He spent hours alone until rescued by a group of local Thais. As for Tomás, the baby only 2 years old, he vanished from everyone's view. No one saw where he was taken. The chances of finding him alive were minimal given the violence of the waters and the lack of physical structure in such a young child. Enrique and Lucas remained together on the thatched roof, pushed by the waters until reaching higher ground. There, they exited the sea and sought shelter in a damaged building where they encountered other injured victims. With Lucas injured and frightened, Enrique decided to seek medical help. He carried his son across long distances, traversing completely destroyed areas with overturned vehicles, uprooted trees, and desperate people. After much walking, father and son arrived at an improvised hospital set up inside a nearby school. There, they were attended to by volunteers and doctors working tirelessly to save lives. It was at this location that Enrique discovered Simón had been found and taken to another rescue point. His heart raced. 2 sons were alive. But he knew nothing about Maria and Tomás. In the school, Lucas was examined and received treatment for some cuts. Despite being injured, Enrique barely cared about himself. His mind focused only on finding the other family members. He began asking everyone entering the hospital if they had news of a Spanish woman named Maria. Many answered negatively, but he did not give up. Luckily, a hospital employee told him a woman matching Maria's description had been treated at another emergency unit a little distance away. Without wasting time, Enrique decided to go there. With Lucas in his arms and Simón following with assistance from a volunteer, he walked kilometers on foot, facing heat, fear, and physical exhaustion. By the end of the day, father and sons arrived at the other hospital. And there, in an emotional and unforgettable encounter, Enrique reunited with Maria, his beloved wife, after hours of separation and uncertainty. The reunion between Maria and Enrique was one of the most significant moments of that journey. After hours apart, fighting individually for their lives, they embraced with all the strength they had left. Maria wept upon seeing her older sons in her husband's arms. She could hardly believe that Lucas and Simón were alive. But one question echoed in her mind. And Tomás? Where is our baby? Enrique tried to remain calm but also knew nothing about young Tomás. He had disappeared right at the start of the tsunami and, until that moment, no information existed about him. The entire family was physically reunited except for the baby. They were injured, tired, and frightened, but alive. It was an immense relief, yet the pain of Tomás' absence was unbearable. Maria recounted to Enrique how she'd been dragged by the waters, awakened trapped in a tree, and helped others before being rescued. It was proof of courage and resilience. Enrique, in turn, described how he managed to hold Lucas during the chaos and how he found Simón later. Each person's story brimmed with survival and faith. Even in an improvised environment with limited medical resources, professionals did their best to treat the family's injuries. Maria required stitches on her legs and received hydration fluids. Lucas and Simón were examined and had their cuts cleaned and bandaged. Fortunately, the children appeared more emotionally than physically wounded. Despite everything, the makeshift hospital overflowed. Injured people kept arriving in droves. Medications, food, and even clean water were scarce. It was truly a war against time. Maria and Enrique decided to ask everyone entering the facility if they had seen or heard about a missing baby. Many responded negatively. Others couldn't speak clearly due to their own distress. Some foreign volunteers began assisting with the search. They used improvised lists with descriptions of missing victims and spoke with rescue teams still operating in the area. Every minute without news of Tomás decreased the family's hope. How could a 2-year-old baby survive such a giant wave? It seemed nearly impossible. Yet, despite the despair, Maria maintained her faith. She constantly said, "He's alive. I know he's alive." Her words served as light in the darkness. At the end of that day, exhausted and emotionally shaken, the Belón-Alvarez family rested together in a corner of the hospital. The 3 children slept clinging to their parents, as if fearing they might get lost again. They didn't know whether Tomás was alive, didn't know when they would return home, but one thing was certain. They were together, and that alone was reason enough to continue fighting. The next morning after reuniting, Maria could no longer remain still. Despite her still painful wounds, she knew she needed to do something, anything, to find baby Tomás. Enrique, even exhausted, fully supported his wife's decision. The 2 older sons, Lucas and Simón, were with them, but both carried a heavy silence, as if feeling their brother's absence. They decided to leave the makeshift hospital where they were staying and begin a personal search for Tomás. They believed he might be in another rescue center or perhaps with a local family who had found him. Dressed in torn clothes and bodies marked by injuries, the Belón-Alvarez family began walking through the devastated streets of Khao Lak. The scene was desolate. Buildings destroyed, vehicles overturned, and people crying for their lost loved ones. Early in their journey, they encountered foreign volunteers helping identify missing victims. They gave mothers copies of photos of missing children and asked for help searching. Maria showed Tomás's photo to everyone she met. Doctors, nurses, local residents, and even tourists attempting to leave the area. Each negative response hurt deeply, but she didn't give up. Despite good intentions, some locals were hostile toward the family. Some thought they were invading spaces meant for Thai citizens themselves. There were moments of tension and prejudice, but there were also many compassionate hearts. A group of Thai women approached Maria and offered food and water. They had also lost family members, but understood her pain as a mother. At one emergency station, Enrique spoke with a rescue team that informed him, unfortunately, many young children hadn't survived the tsunami. The chances of finding Tomás alive were minimal. Even faced with this harsh reality, Maria maintained her faith. "I know he's alive," she repeated whenever doubts arose. It was as if every step taken was driven by this internal certainty. The family visited makeshift hospitals, reception centers, triage tents, and even schools turned into morgues. In each place, they looked carefully to see if they recognized the baby. Lucas and Simón accompanied their parents bravely. Though still very young, they seemed to understand the gravity of the situation. Sometimes, they held Maria's hand, as if wanting to transmit strength. On the 3rd day after the tsunami, while visiting a medical unit set up inside an abandoned clinic, a nurse caught Enrique's attention. She mentioned having seen a small child with characteristics similar to Tomás. The family's heart raced. Was it possible? They quickly followed to the indicated location, filled with expectation and fear at the same time. The emotion was contagious, but caution remained greater. Upon arrival, they discovered the child wasn't Tomás. But that moment demonstrated that, even on the worst days, hope could unexpectedly arise. On the 4th day after the tsunami, the Belón-Alvarez family had already visited numerous makeshift medical stations in the Khao Lak region. Each step was filled with hope, but also fear of hearing devastating news. Maria hadn't given up searching for Tomás. Despite statistics, despite tragic accounts, she continued firmly believing, "He's alive. I will find him." This phrase gave strength to everyone. While walking down a partially reconstructed road, Enrique and Maria met a local volunteer helping organize lists of missing victims. He asked if they had registered the baby's name on official lists. They replied that they had, and that they had been scouring rescue centers for days. The volunteer then asked an unexpected question. "Do you know that a European baby was found yesterday?" Maria's heart quickened. She could barely speak. Immediately, she asked where the child was. The volunteer explained the baby had been taken to a medical post set up inside a clinic near the city center. Without delay, the entire family ran to the indicated location. Lucas and Simón held their parents' hands tightly, as if sensing something important was about to happen. Upon arriving at the medical post, they were greeted by a Thai doctor who confirmed the information. A Caucasian baby approximately 2 years old had been found by a local fisherman 2 days after the tsunami. The boy was injured, frightened, and deeply shaken, but he was alive. The doctor asked, "Is this Tomás?" Maria wept and said yes, but still couldn't believe she would finally find him. The doctor called a nurse caring for the baby since his arrival. Then, with a racing heart, Maria saw the small, fragile figure of her son brought into her arms by the professional. When Tomás was placed in her arms, Maria broke down in tears. She pressed the baby to her chest, kissed his face repeatedly, and murmured words of relief and gratitude. It was a reunion that seemed taken from a miracle. Lucas and Simón also wanted to touch their little brother. It was a moment of pure emotion. 5 members of a family who had been separated by chaos, now united once again. All alive, all together. The doctor explained how Tomás was found. A local fisherman spotted him stuck in a fallen tree near a riverbank. The baby cried loudly but couldn't move on his own. The man rescued him and took him to the nearest medical post. No one knows how Tomás survived so long alone without adequate food or water. But his story proves that even in the worst possible scenario, life can endure. He was a true lesson in survival. At that moment, while the family embraced in tears, the rest of the world seemed to stop. The pain, injuries, or trauma no longer mattered. What mattered was that everyone was alive. However, even with the complete reunion, the battle of the Belón-Alvarez family hadn't ended yet. They needed to leave Thailand, return home to Spain, and begin dealing with the psychological trauma left by the tragedy. After reuniting with Tomás, the family had to face a new reality. They were physically alive but emotionally weakened. Additionally, they needed to resolve bureaucratic issues to leave Thailand and return home to Spain. The first step was to regularize Tomás's situation. Since he was found by local authorities and taken to a medical post without identification, Thai authorities required documents to ensure the parents were indeed his legal guardians. Maria and Enrique presented copies of the children's birth certificates, passports, and other personal documents they managed to recover from the destroyed hotel. With help from the Spanish embassy, everything was resolved within a few hours. But there was another problem. Everyone was injured, tired, and traumatized. Baby Tomás had cuts on his body and was malnourished. Lucas and Simón also showed signs of shock and exhaustion. The medical team recommended several days of rest before traveling. Maria and Enrique followed the advice, taking time to rest together with their children and begin addressing the emotional impact of what they had experienced. During that week, while recovering, the family started giving interviews and testimonies about their experience. Many international media outlets wanted to know how 5 members of the same family had survived the tsunami and reunited. Images of Maria and Tomás's reunion were released by local media and quickly went viral. The story became a symbol of hope and faith amid chaos. Many people around the world were moved by the case. Meanwhile, the Spanish embassy in Bangkok contacted the family to assist with logistics for their return. Complete support was offered, from transportation to medical assistance during the flight. On the 6th day after the tsunami, with their injuries more stable and minds slightly lighter, the Belón-Alvarez family boarded a plane chartered by the Spanish government. It was time to return home. The flight lasted about 12 hours, with a stopover in Dubai. Throughout the journey, Maria kept Tomás in her lap, as if fearing to lose him again. The older boys slept almost the entire time, exhausted. Upon arriving at Madrid Barajas International Airport, They were greeted by relatives, friends, and government representatives. It was a triumphant return, but filled with emotion and sadness for the losses suffered worldwide. Doctors and psychologists awaited them to assess each person's physical and mental condition. Everyone would undergo continuous treatment in the following months, as the trauma left by the tsunami wouldn't easily be overcome. Maria especially felt pains in her legs and arms from the injuries caused by the wave. She began intensive physiotherapy sessions, but always kept her mind focused on the family's emotional recovery. Lucas, Simón, and Tomás began child therapy to deal with psychological traumas. Enrique and Maria also sought constant support, knowing the healing process was long and delicate. Despite all difficulties, that family had proven it was possible to resist the worst imaginable scenario. Yet, a new important stage lay ahead. Rebuilding normal life, with love, care, and great inner strength. Back in their hometown in Madrid, the Belón-Alvarez family had to deal with a reality completely different from what they left before their vacation in Thailand. The home seemed the same, but they were no longer the same people. Maria and Enrique knew the recovery process would be long. Physically, the wounds healed, but emotionally, the trauma of the tsunami remained very present in everyone's mind, especially the children's. Lucas, the oldest son, began having constant nightmares. He would wake up frightened in the middle of the night, sweating cold and crying. He said he saw the sea coming toward him and feared water, even the shower. Simón, the middle child, became quieter and more introspective. Once extroverted and playful, now he easily startled at loud noises and avoided going to the beach or any place with large bodies of water. As for Tomás, the baby who survived the impossible, he seemed physically recovered but had difficulty sleeping alone. At 2 years old, he needed to be in his parents' arms or physical contact to feel secure. Maria also suffered psychological aftereffects. She constantly had flashbacks of the giant wave, broken trees, and people screaming for help. At times, it was difficult to breathe just remembering. Enrique tried to keep his head high but carried guilt for not managing to protect his children completely. He often wondered if he could have done something differently. To cope with everything, the family sought professional help. Each member began attending regular sessions with psychologists specialized in childhood trauma and adults surviving natural disasters. The therapies were essential. The boys learned techniques to control fear and express their emotions. Maria and Enrique discovered ways to talk about what happened without repressing the pain, which further strengthened family bonds. Over time, Lucas returned to swimming, but always accompanied. Simón gradually regained his playful nature, and Tomás began sleeping alone in his room. It was slow but steady progress. School was also an environment for readjustment. Teachers were informed about the family's background, and measures were taken to ensure the children received emotional support within the classroom. Maria decided to share her story in lectures and community events. She spoke about resilience, mental strength, and how it's possible to overcome trauma with love and mutual support. Her testimonies moved crowds. Enrique, in turn, dedicated himself more to volunteer work. He began helping families who lost loved ones in natural disasters, offering emotional and practical guidance. Despite everything, the family preserved the good memories of their trip to Thailand, the children's laughter, the smell of the sea, the photos before the tsunami. These memories served as reminders that life continues, even after chaos. On the anniversary of the tragedy, the entire family traveled to the Spanish coast. There, together, they cast flowers into the sea in tribute to the tsunami victims. It was a moment of closure, healing, and gratitude for their own lives. In the months following the tsunami, the Belón-Alvarez family's story began gaining international recognition. Emotional accounts of their survival, separation, and reunion were shared by news outlets worldwide. Many wondered, how could one family endure such a devastating event and emerge whole? How could 5 people resist the most violent waters and find each other again? The answer seemed to lie in unity, unwavering faith, and the mental strength of each family member. This story touched hearts and inspired millions facing their own personal battles. In 2008, Spanish filmmaker Juan Antonio Bayona contacted María Belón after hearing about her experience. He had been deeply moved by the story and wanted to turn it into a film. Bayona, known for his sensitive and dramatic style, saw in the family's story not only a survival drama but also a powerful human narrative about love, struggle, and resilience. Maria agreed to tell her story with one clear condition: that the movie be faithful to what really happened, without sensationalistic exaggerations or distortions. She wanted the audience to see the truth behind the trauma. For this, Maria worked directly with screenwriter Sergio G. Sanchez, recounting all the details of the tragedy, from the moment before the tsunami to the final reunion with Tomás. Producing the film took years. It was necessary to reconstruct tsunami scenes with realistic special effects, shoot in locations similar to Thailand, and prepare the actors to live intense and emotionally challenging moments. In the cinematic version, Maria was portrayed by British actress Naomi Watts, who received Oscar and Golden Globe nominations for her powerful and emotional performance. Ewan McGregor played Enrique, bringing humanity and vulnerability to the role. The boys Lucas, Simón, and Tomás were represented by young actors who underwent intense training to capture the essence of the real children's emotions during the disaster. When the film was released in 2012, it moved the entire world. Critics praised the director's portrayal of the tsunami chaos and the family's journey, highlighting the beauty and pain of the human experience. For Maria and Enrique, watching the film was a significant experience. It was like reliving everything, Maria said in an interview. But at the same time, it was therapeutic to see our story told with respect. The film not only honored the victims of the Indian Ocean tsunami but also served as a warning about the importance of natural disaster prevention and solidarity in the face of human suffering. Moreover, the production helped raise funds for aid projects in tsunami-affected communities through partnerships with international organizations and awareness campaigns linked to its release. With the film's success, the Belón-Alvarez family became an important voice globally regarding post-trauma psychological recovery awareness. Their testimonies continue to inspire people worldwide.